At the age of 21, Nanette Crist had an illumination experience, seeing the presence of God that appeared to her as a diamond sun. Her spiritual gifts were enhanced as she was led to the path of higher knowledge. She and fellow spiritual traveler Desiree met on that path and now come together to share with you the Diamond Sun secret. Hi there, and welcome to Diamond Sun Secret. I'm Desiree and I'm here not with my partner, Nanette Crist, because I'm just going to introduce a portion of my show, Intuitive Journey with Desiree, where I first introduced Nanette and interviewed her about her experience. And so we wanted to just share that story that she shared with me about what is the story behind the Diamond Sun and why did we call this show Diamond Sun Secret. Now, our introduction does give a little bit about that, but for your interest, I wanted to share a part of that interview where she describes her experience in full. And if you want to see the whole thing, the link will be down there below. But otherwise, please enjoy this interview with Nanette that I did a few months ago about her experience. Thank you. To do an interview with me. And I will give a brief introduction because she's so varied and dynamic in so many ways that there's a really long bio. So we'll just talk to her about that stuff. But Nanette is a practical mystic who had an illumination experience when she was 21 years old. This ecstatic state of going into the white light while seeing and communicating with the God presence was the supreme experience of her life. After this point of her gifts of the spirit and multiplied, including clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairsentience, precognition, and seeress, that's a good word, of past and future events. She's also well known as an eminent spiritual artist. And I'm going to stop there because I'm just reading this. I'd rather you get to learn it from Nanette. So welcome, Nanette. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Desiree. We've had a wonderful experience sharing with each other, and so it's a good idea to let other people be part of the conversation.
Yeah, and you have so much, like I say, this is Intuitive Journey with Desiree, and one of my goals, I share a lot of practical life coaching tips on this show, but when I get to interview people that just have experience and knowledge like you do, it's so exciting, especially when it goes into the unseen metaphysical realms that we all know are real, but some people, if they can't see it, they don't believe it. So here's a lady with personal evidence through her own life and practice. So I'm going to ask questions, and we're just going to freeform with this.
Sounds good.
So I mentioned there in an introduction that you had this experience when you were 21. So why don't we start there?
All right.
And actually start a little before that, because something happened at 21. So let's actually back up a little bit and say maybe, what kind of childhood, teen years you had. How was that different before that experience and after? So let's start with just about your general life as you were growing up.
Well, I was raised in a really nice family of Christians, not fundamentalists. My mother was Eastern Orthodox. My father was Presbyterian, so they wound up compromising on Episcopalian.
Okay.
But my mother's side of the family had some intuitives there. My aunt was a seeress.
Oh.
She could just touch somebody's hand and see the future for them. But she didn't want to keep seeing because she could see something that was going to happen and she couldn't do anything to stop it if it was a painful experience. So she decided she didn't want that gift anymore. And she was born with a veil over her face. And I was too. So she told me at a young age that you have the veil. You can see things other people may not be able to see because you're spiritually open. And so my father was a scientist. He actually helped develop Lycra spandex.
Oh, I love him. Thank you, Dad.
All the stretchy things I say, thank you, Dad.
Yeah, I'm so glad for him.
And my mother was an artist and very devout and spiritual in her own right. I wouldn't say that either one of them were what I would call spiritually open, but both intuitive and lived according to noble and traditional family values and wanting to be of service, not only to the family, but to others. And then I had an older brother who was like Edgar Casey, America's Sleeping Prophet, wide awake though. He didn't have to go to sleep. And I had a younger sister. They're all in the spirit world now.
Okay. Everybody, are you the last in the family that's still living?
Yeah. So I had 11 family members pass on in as many years, fairly recently. So my mother was an artist, and when I was 7, I decided I was going to be an artist too. So I started painting, and she would teach me some things, but I was pulling through from an angelic being who told me his name was Raphael, who I didn't know at the time who Raphael was. And later on, I didn't know if it was the artist or the angel, and I did find out. But he was trying to get me to convey my visions of the other worlds, not just nature and the multidimensional realities, because we all have 5 physical senses and at least 5 spiritual senses. And when they're in sync, when they're in harmony, then we start to perceive them more consciously. But it's available to all of us all of the time. And so my mother got me doing portraits professionally when I was 12 because she had too many commissions of children to do. And I was happy to do that. But nature were my only playmates. And it was about 2nd grade when they found out I was actually way past legally blind.
Oh.
I was born where I couldn't see any further than 6 inches from my nose. And because I got good grades and I could play piano just from hearing it, they didn't know I couldn't see the music, I couldn't see the books, I couldn't see the blackboard. And so as a result, I think that pushed me into having to open the spiritual senses so that I didn't trip on every crack on the crowd and fall in a hole.
Have your energetic feelers out there for you.
Right. And my parents thought that I was, you were graceful, but you kept tripping and hurting your knees, so we wanted to send you to ballet. And I said, Mom, I couldn't even see my feet, and I didn't know it because I thought everybody saw that one.
Right.
So when I got glasses, I could perceive more of the details of the physical world and was delighted to be able to paint them later. Okay. So make it look very real. And my father, when I was 10, said to me, he had studied the prophecy pyramid before World War II and found out that there's a timeline in the Great Pyramid that someone had written books about and prophesied World War II, as did Edgar Casey. And he said, the book of Revelations and the prophecy pyramid is going to happen in your lifetime, little sweetie. So if you figure out what that means, you let me know. So that set me off on a search to study the prophecy and all of the world's religions.
Wow.
And spirituality and also metaphysics. So he would coach me on science as well. And that's how that all got started. So by the time I was a teenager.
So you already, just your family and your own feelings, you were already in that realm. So it wasn't like, oh, you were just out playing, basketball with your friends and didn't really think about stuff like that.
No.
You were already on the path. And then...
And then when I was a teenager, I said to my parents, I don't want to go right into art school. First, I want to take a year off so I can go to all the spiritual centers in the country, maybe around the world, and study from them directly. And I'll get a job too, but I want to be able to be free to do that. So they agreed, and that's what I did. As a result, I got to study firsthand both Eastern and Western mysticism. And the interesting thing is that mystics don't disagree. You can have a Sufi and a Baha'i and a Kabbalist and a Christian mystic, and they're all going to agree because they've learned to get it directly from the source.
And the truth is the truth.
Yes.
It's like the truth is the truth when you get to the bare bones of it, right?
Yes. So it's the universal spiritual principles. And once we understand those, then we can apply them to every aspect of our life. Now, that is at the point where I also not only was devoted as a Christian, but wanted to understand more about the mysteries that were not expressed in the Bible. So I read all the other scriptures that weren't in the Bible, the Apocryphal, the Nag Hammadi, and so forth, and got some level of discernment. And at that point, some friends of mine said, we're going up to see a Swami. He's a young boy. He's coming to New York, and he's our Swami now. Would you like to come with your significant other? So I said, sure. We went up to New York, and when we got up there, it was 3:00 in the morning, And they said, you can sleep on the floor if you like at the ashram here. So by then I hadn't eaten for several hours, but we laid down. And as soon as I laid down, boom, I see this light right here in front of me. And inside the spherical light is the face of a young Indian boy. And he's looking at me and he's communicating to me. It's almost like you would have a dream, but I was awake.
Yes.
And he's communicating to me, trying to find out what am I doing there with the rest of his disciples in his ashram.
Wow.
And so he's going back through my, what you might call it, records of my own memory of where I'd come from. And when I realized what he was doing, I thought, well, he didn't ask permission. So boom, I shut that door. So I introduced myself. And then I looked back into him. And I see this old Indian man's face with wire frame glasses inside the same sphere of light. I thought, that's strange. I've never seen two people that close. So the next day I told his disciples of my experience, and they said, oh yes, well, our guru's father was a saint in India. And when he died, his 3-year-old son jumped up on the funeral pyre and said, why are you all mourning? Don't you know I'm still here?
Oh.
Meaning the father had come to overshadow or perhaps stepped into the body of the boy guru. Sadhguru, they called him. So at that point.
So those two faces were one and the same.
One, yeah. And I thought, well, I wonder if that's good, because I wondered how much of his own volition he had. And we went into the what they call satsang, which is where they talk about reading truth, and you're supposed to respond if you want to. Well, by now we've had a little water and they're passing some salads, but it was now the second day I hadn't eaten, and I thought there's not enough food here for everybody, so I'm not going to eat. So I had a little water. At one point they said, when you are ready to receive knowledge of God, then you'll receive knowledge of God. And I thought, oh my goodness, am I ready? There's nothing more that I want in the whole world than to receive the knowledge of God. So he said, but first you must accept the Guru Maharaji as your Lord and Master. And I'm like, uh-oh.
There's a catch. Like, why do I need him?
I saw him last night. And I thought, no, if I was going to accept somebody, of course, it would be Jesus. So I got up and started walking out of the ashram. And as I'm hearing, it's like your higher self or your angelic voice is asking me, the God presence is asking me, in order to receive knowledge of God, would I be willing to let go of my family that I was close to, my art that I loved, my dog, my career, my crown? At the time I was in Miss Delaware. Would I be really ready to let go of all that? And I said, yes, I absolutely would. I would let go of this whole world to be one with God. And at that point, I was completely free in my soul. There was no other love that I had more than that. And when I walked out of that building, the guy, David, that I'd come up there with, started to follow me. He said, are you all right? Already I was going into a state of bliss. It was like going through a near-death experience without having to die physically.
Yeah, that's much better.
So spiritually, I had volunteered to let go of everything that's taken away from you when you die. And I start walking out of the building knowing I don't know where I'm going, but I'm fine. And as we're walking through New York, I didn't want to say a word, as if I knew that if I spoke, it would break this transcendent state that I was entering into. And I wound up in another ashram a few blocks away, and we sat down on the floor, and the man was reading from the Aquarian Gospel of Jesus the Christ about the descent of the Holy Spirit, the Pentecost. And as I closed my eyes to listen to him, I hear what sounds like thousands of fluttering wings. And I see this whirling, fluttering white light, this sphere of light with fluttering lights around it, all coming towards me, and boom, it landed on the top of my head.
Was that an eyes open or an eyes closed experience?
Both. And it landed on it was audio and visual, because I heard the fluttering and rushing sound. It's as if you had thousands of bird wings.
Yeah.
But it was spiraling, fluttering, and it came down, and when it landed on my head, everything went white light. If I had my eyes closed, I would see nothing but white light. And if I had my eyes open, I'd see everything with translucent light around or between me and it. So I could still see you, but it was light.
Right.
And while I'm in this infinite light that's everywhere, I felt nothing but total ecstasy and joy and love, as if the light itself were love itself.
Yeah.
And as I went into the light, I wondered at that moment, I wonder what this light is. And I was told immediately it is source energy. So then I had no questions. I had a million before that. But at that point, I just wanted to bask in this ecstatic love of unconditional, total immersion of the source of all that is.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, I wanted to see if there was a source to the white light. So I went up into the light from my perspective, and I found that there was a concentrated center of being within that light. And that center of being looked like a diamond sun. It was like a spherical, plasma-like being with iridescent, incandescent, prismatic rivers of living light flowing between these spherical facets. And I knew that within this being, I was looking at the source of all other beings. Even at that time, before computers were known or any of the technologies, I understood that this being had somehow reproduced itself, a divine spark, an identical microcopy of itself in or accessible to each and every one of us.
Mm-hmm.
And that was our connection to the divine. So I couldn't tell if the being who told me, it said, I am that I am. I am that I was. I am that I am. I am that I will be. And I knew then that I was seeing the God presence. And it may have been as big as all the universes together or as small as an atom.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I would say all the above.
Yeah.
So I was in that state of complete nonverbal ecstasy. And the only other question I had was, is this boy, this guru that I came to see, does he have anything to do with this experience? And I didn't get a yes or a no. What I was told was, you are at this moment a perfect master and are to become one. Meaning, if I stayed in that state of oneness with the divine, then I would be a perfect master, as this guru was said to be. Which is quite a challenge. But so for 3 days...
Whip out perfect master. Oh yeah, well, that's in my pocket here, my perfect mastery.
Just drive down the highway and that's it.
Yeah, that's mastery.
So for 3 days I was unable to speak, and it really would have been irreverent to try in the white light, in this state of ecstasy. And
were you eating? Did you finally start to eat again?
That was one of the mistakes. I shouldn't have eaten. So we were starting to drive home, and it was my Firebird, which had 2 bucket seats.
I had a Firebird too.
Mine was electric blue.
Mine was
even
gold.
More electric than that.
Mine was gold.
So he said,
first car. It's like pretty cool.
He said, my boyfriend at the time said, there's another person that needs to ride back to Philly from New York on the way to Delaware. Is it okay? I said, sure. So he got in the car, and now there isn't enough seats for everybody.
Right.
So I just knew that I could sit on that little metal piece this wide between the 2 front seats, and I would be fine for a 5-hour trip.
Oh.
Which I did. I didn't feel a thing. Not only that, I had a complete sense of timelessness, as if there's anything I wanted to know at any time, past, present, or future, I would know it. And I thought, I don't want to know anything. I just want to be like this, one with the divine. There isn't anything other word even coming into my mind. So he stopped at a restaurant on the way back. It was Chinese, and said, how about a piece of, do you want anything to eat? I went, how about a piece of shrimp toast, which was very oily? I took 1 bite, and it felt like lead in my stomach.
Oh.
And not having had enough training, I had some yogic training, but not enough from anybody who had an illumination experience with God. I wasn't able to ask the question, what do you do next? I had no training in that.
Oh.
And so my swamis really hadn't ever discussed it. They said, oh, well, you'll attain the lotus, the I am that I am, the Satchidananda, all of this, but they didn't talk about what do you do next. And so when I got home, he said to my parents, she's really lit up. She won't talk, but she's really, really blissed out. I go, oh,
Blissed out. Your parents, did they catch those phrases? I mean, like, if I had a boyfriend take me home and say that, my mother would say, "What did you give her? You know, what's she on?"
Was it LSD?
Yeah, right.
And my mother, well, of course, the DMT does go off in your brain when these things happen.
You don't need the LSD.
You don't need it. Then you're not supposed to ever have to use it.
Yeah.
So my mother looked at me, and she's not normally clairvoyant, but she said there was white light emanating from my head and shoulders. And my brother, who was trained as a Jungian psychologist, went to consult with his others when I could speak, and I could only say one word at a time for a while. He said, "What did you see?" I'd say, "Truth, God, light, love." I could only express one word until I processed it. And he said to his psychologist friend, they decided, well, if all of the neurons in your brain went off at once, you would see white light, which happens when we go through near death or final death. But the rest of it was a mystical experience that is beyond any scientific explanation. They said, oh, both hemispheres are communicating and so forth. So this is when I was just 21. And after that, I opened more spiritually. So I tried to integrate that into my life, but like Parsifal, who in the Grail stories had discovered the Holy Grail in the Grail Castle, but he was a naive and pure soul who didn't even wonder about what brought about evil in the world, what caused human suffering. So he didn't ask the question, whom does the Grail serve? He didn't ask the question, why does the Grail King suffer? I didn't think to ask any of those things.
Well, you had a chance. You had more chances, right?
And so what happens with Parsifal, he's sent out into the world and put into every horrible situation that no person who is moral or spiritual would ever want to find themselves in, and have to deal with the suffering, the agony, and the moral dilemmas. And so I, like a female Parsifal, went out into the world and had to go through all of those experiences to come to understand what is the nature of human suffering and evil, and how is it that God is only good. Because when I experienced that being, I knew beyond any shadow of a doubt, the I am that I am, our source, our creator, is only good. It's like God is a tiny, tiny child that's so pure and pristine and beautiful and exquisite. There is no evil in that being, and he cannot relate to it. He, she, God is and it, is both, or all. God cannot relate directly to evil.